Africa Film for Impact Festival.
And we're going to go right into the section for this morning. That's the UCT Impact series, the documentary series. So I'll be handing over directly to Dr. Liani Matsop, who would moderate this section. Dr. Liani, thank you very much. Once again, thank the UCT team for partnering with us on this project. So at this moment, we'll hand over to you to moderate this section for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bright. Thanks for the warm welcome. And I'm going to hand over to Mickey Riedlinghuis, who's introducing this session. I'm going to be talking quite a lot, so it's going to be nice to hear her voice before you hear mine.
Welcome, everybody, and thanks for that warm and exciting welcome from the red carpet in Abuja. Lovely to join you here from a warm Cape Town this morning. It's actually my job to moderate the session, which is going to be presented by the lovely Leonie Maasdorp. So that gave me some more time to gather my thoughts. So Leonie and I have been co-organizing and curating a series of impact sessions over the last few months. And this is the third in a series of sessions. The first was at the Encounters South African International Documentary Film Festival, followed by the Durban Film Art. And now here we're very excited to be with you in Abuja and streaming around the world. So Leonie is a senior lecturer at the Center for Film and Media Studies at the University of Cape Town. She also convenes the Master of Documentary Arts degree program and is the academic director of the UCT TV studio and also the Stepping Stone community, which is a very exciting engagement video training program. She has also worked previously in the industry as a video editor and a documentary director, and she has been working in the field of impact and coordinating impact labs in South Africa for the last couple of years. So the session today by Leonie is really an introduction to impact and a very compact, very exciting presentation of where to start. Handing over to you, Leonie.
Thanks, Mickey. I appreciate that. Yes, this is going to be a very compact introduction to the basic concepts and terminology of impact producing. And for those of you who attended the Durban Film Art, this is similar to what we did there with a few additions. And the whole idea is to give you a toolkit of things that you can consider right at the beginning when you're starting to consider your impact campaign. I would like to also just point you to our other sessions. So we are presenting 4 sessions in total at AFFIF this year. This is the first one, Ready, Steady, Go. And then we have 2 wonderful case study sessions planned for you. The other one follows directly after this one at 11 a.m. Western African time. And the other one is at 8:30 Western African time tomorrow. We've made it a little bit earlier to accommodate our compatriots from other continents who have to stay up until 1 or 2 a.m. to join us. And then after that, the final session tomorrow is at 10 Western African time. And we have an absolutely stellar lineup of people who are going to talk about local African and also international support for impact. If you have a look at our flyer or our social media, you'll see that the speakers that we have lined up for all of the sessions are absolutely incredible. So that's going to be very exciting. I seem to be stuck in my PowerPoint, unable to move forward. So let me just quickly reset it up and then share it with you again.
So while Leonie's getting her screen share set up, I'm just going to pop in and remind you to keep an eye on the chat, where I'm going to be adding some useful resources as the session goes along, and you're welcome to cut and paste those onto your desktops so that you can refer back to them after the session if you like.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Mickey. And I also put a little note in the chat earlier for you that you're welcome to introduce yourselves. And yeah, it's just so that you get an idea of who else is in the room and so that we get an idea as well. So this is the first AFFIF, and it's a virtual edition, very exciting. So we get to engage with people around the world, and people around the world get to engage with us. It's really an incredible opportunity to get together with people who we wouldn't normally be able to fly to Africa and host at a festival. So it's very exciting. Please keep an eye on our social media. The film festival is at AFFIF, so it's AFFIF.ng, and we are at UCT_TV. Mickey has mentioned the links, and that's really a resource for you to go and check out after this session. And we are going to have breaks for Q&A throughout the session. So please do start putting your questions in as soon as they pop into your minds. So in the session, I'm going to cover what impact producing is, and then give you that starter kit that I mentioned at the beginning. So moving straight along, if my presentation will, yes, there we go. So a definition of impact producing is the design and implementation of a strategy that ensures that a social change film, so that could be social justice issues, human rights issues, environmental themes, reach the right audience at the right time and with the right kinds of interventions to optimize its potential to effect social change. A couple of definitions or comments about impact producing include one from the Impact Field Guide, which is one of the links that we're putting in the chat for you, and an incredible resource for anyone who wants to get into doing an impact strategy for their film. The 21st century has become one in which the power of film to change the world is impossible to ignore. And I think that that is really something that guides us in this work, in optimizing the work of the film to make sure that it creates the change that we want to see. And then Active Voice says that you can use stories, art, and culture to advance social change. So all of these are very powerful media. You all know how we engage with social media, with films, with television, with streaming these days. And we really want to meet the audiences where they are at, because changing people's minds, changing their behavior is very, very difficult. And film is a very powerful tool to communicate with audiences and to make them care about issues. One of the first things that you need to figure out when you start engaging with this world of impact is where you fit on this vision and impact continuum. So, sorry, art and impact continuum. So on the one end of the spectrum, you would have an artist who's making a film purely for self-expression or to put something beautiful out in the world. On the other end of the spectrum, you would have an activist who wants to change some kind of an issue that they see in the world, and they will use whatever tools or media are available to them. I feel that social justice filmmakers and impact producers sit somewhere in the middle between these two. We use the most powerful aspects of the art of filmmaking, but we do that to effect powerful change or important change in the world. So if you sit somewhere in between these two, if you have the skills and you have the artistic temperament to make films, but you also have something, an issue that you really care about, that you want to change, you are the perfect impact filmmaker or impact producer. But the very, very important thing to remember is, as Bedi Finzi of Doc Society says, without a good film, there will be no impact. So there's no use designing the most sophisticated and well-conceived impact strategy around a film that doesn't touch the audience. So you have to make sure that that art vision of the film is in place before you design an impact campaign around that. Mickey, is now a good point to break for a question, or was it too early?
I think it's a great place to pause and maybe ask a first question or two. I'm actually going to pop a first question into the mix, and if anybody else wants to follow up, just drop some questions in the chat and I will pose them. We're not going to ask people to ask questions live, just because it sometimes creates a bit of a delay with audio anomalies. But if you want to put your questions in the chat, I will certainly pick them up and share them. So, I mean, your graphic is very clear: activist, artist, social justice filmmaker in the middle. Traditionally, impact has very much focused on the documentary genre, and fiction filmmakers. I know there's a lot of fiction filmmakers in this festival and watching us on YouTube, and obviously Nigeria is very well known for their very strong fiction film industry. So how do we take this and apply it to fiction? Has that happened in the past, or is there actually a gap for us to start developing impact for fiction?
Definitely. There are some incredible models that use not feature documentary films as Doc Society, excuse me, and the Good Pitch would support. And those are they're the biggest organizations worldwide who actively, regularly host get-togethers, provide funding and support impact campaigns. But there's so many other wonderful projects around the world that use short films as a basis for the strategy, or fiction films as a basis for the strategy. One example that I can mention is in South Africa, we have Sunshine Cinema. It's a solar cinema distribution organization. So they have a mobile cinema that they take around to different places that don't have cineplexes and theaters. And they find that fiction films perform much better with their audiences. So they tend to select feature films that touch on certain issues. Ingleba would be a great example in the South African context, because that was about initiation within the isiXhosa culture. So, that film created an incredible amount of debate in South Africa. So that was a very good film to use for these kinds of screenings. And it really depends on who your audience is. And we'll talk a little bit more about audience later. But Mickey, as you pointed out, Nigeria has such a strong film production culture already. The biggest producer of film in the world, if not one of the top three, if not the biggest one. And, there's already an existing hunger for fiction film. So again, for me, something that's really important is to meet the audience where it is. If you know that your target audience watches feature-length fiction films, then you should be using that medium to produce work about the issue that you want to address. The one thing that I always just caution people against is an audience can sniff out an issue-driven film a mile away. And you really don't want to put your audience off from watching your film because they think, oh, this is just going to be another issue film. It's going to be preachy. You want to hide the issue inside entertainment if you're going to be making a fiction film. And I'd like to refer to the Mary Poppins principle. For any of you who've seen that mainstream Hollywood musical, there's a song in the film where she's trying to give the kids that she's the nanny of medicine. And the lyrics of the song go, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So you need quite a big spoonful of sugar if you're going to reach people around a social justice topic or an issue.
Great, thanks for that. I haven't picked up any questions in the chat, but I have shared some resources. So just reminding everybody that they can keep looking at the chat and participating via the chat.
Fantastic. Maybe something else that's worth pointing out at this point when we're talking about this idea of the art vision versus the impact vision. I think a lot of people fear that you can only do the one or the other. You can either have a commercial film or an impact film. And there's so many fantastic models that show that you can do both. You can premiere your film at a fantastic festival. You can have a festival run. You can sell your film to broadcasters. You can even have a theatrical run, and then still use the film for impact screenings as well. And it really just depends on the design of your strategy. I would like to point you in the direction of looking at the film For Summer in this regard. You know, that film showed at the top festivals around the world. It won awards at festivals. It won a BAFTA award. It was nominated for an Oscar award, and they're having a very, very successful and a very strong impact campaign as well. Okay, I want to jump straight ahead and get into the impact toolkit. So my impact toolkit, the very first thing in that toolkit is really to understand your vision, to understand what your art vision is for the film and what your impact vision is for the film, because designing the strategy really depends on, again, whether it's a really good film, but also what your desires are in terms of the impact. Then you have to identify your film themes. You have to set up your impact goals. You have to find your target audience and connect with potential partners and foster relationships with them. And then you need to think very carefully about the time, place, and context that you release the film into. So starting with the film themes, you really have to look very objectively at your film and identify what the film is about and what the film says. Very often we make a film thinking that we are addressing a certain theme and not realizing that there might be another theme that comes across in a very strong way. A film that I can mention in this regard is Strike a Rock, directed by Aliki Sarigas, and she set out to make a film to highlight the injustices in Marikana, in a space where there had been a strike that was suppressed by police in South Africa, and 34 mine workers were killed. And so the film was to highlight the living conditions of the people after the Marikana massacre, and specifically to highlight the women in that space who were doing work to support the community. So, you know, on the surface, it seems like it's a film about the Marikana massacre and it's a film about injustice. But other themes that come across very, very strongly in the film are around women organizing within their communities and women forming community-based organizations, the strength of women to band together for change. So in addition to partnering with legal organizations who were fighting for the legal rights of the people who were still living in Marikana, the filmmakers also partnered with feminist organizations and organizations that foster community-based women's organizations. So the film was also used to inspire and create communities. And it's very, very important that your impact goals align with your themes. It happens from time to time that I'll hear somebody say, you know, my film is about X and my impact campaign is going to be about Y. And then it's very difficult to understand how that campaign is going to work, because there needs to be a strong relationship between the film and the campaign. The film, after all, is the basis of the campaign. So in terms of impact dynamics, what are the things that we could potentially try to change? Firstly, we can change minds. We can make people think differently about a topic. We can make them feel differently about a topic. There are many topics in Africa that are ripe for being addressed in this way, where people have very entrenched beliefs about certain things. And by making a film where you have a strong central character and we see the journey of the character, we see the impact of, for example, racial discrimination, gender discrimination.
Send us 10 gig to do this, and they come to the meeting.
So we can address those kinds of discrimination by showing the audience the impact that the discrimination has on a particular character. And this is often called humanizing the issue. We can also aim to change behavior, but I have to warn you that this is really quite difficult. There's certain contexts where it can be changed and it can be very effective. One of my favorite examples is a film called Bag It. It's about plastic bags, about not using plastic bags. And that impact team did very, very good work where they measured the number of plastic bags that were requested by customers at supermarkets before and after a screening of the form in that area. So they could provide very strong evidence that the form was effective at changing people's behavior in terms of using plastic bags. But changing whether somebody takes a plastic or a paper bag, that's not such a difficult behavior to change, arguably. Behavior that's much more difficult to change is discriminatory behavior. So, you know, it's very difficult. So those entrenched beliefs are the ones that are the most difficult to break down. Building communities, I already mentioned the Strike a Rock example, where the form was used to provide a model to women in different communities, not only mining affected communities, but other communities as well, to provide a model to them for women's organizations and strong female leadership. And then to change structures, we often think of this as the most difficult thing to do. And structural changes are legal changes. So if we go back to the Bagot example, to get government to ban plastic bags in the whole country, that's a very difficult change to effect. Or to get the CEO of a particular supermarket chain to you know, take plastic bags completely out of the chain in the supermarkets. So policy change or legal change, those are very, very difficult to effect. Aggregate is an impact company based in the US, and you'll meet Alison Burnfield in Mickey's case study session early tomorrow morning, if you stick around for that. And Aggregate has this model of the impact funnel. And they say that, you know, just watching the film should make you aware of the issue. So that shouldn't be a major target of your impact campaign. The impact campaign really should be going beyond that. What is important is to lead the audience through these different steps, and awareness is just the beginning. But what a film can do is to make the person aware, but also to make them care about the issue. Coming back to that example of having a strong central character who the audience cares about. So when something affects that character, it makes the audience angry, it makes them sad, and that kind of emotion is what drives people to change. Now, where an impact campaign really starts kicking in, you know, an impact campaign can't make people care, but a film can. But what an impact campaign can do is it can provide more information about the issue. So let's say the issue is, you know, one of the forms at the festival, and I apologize, I can't remember the name now, but one of the forms in the festival focuses on date rape. So it's the basis of the form is women who are raped by people who they invite into their homes, people who they trust. And so, you know, a film about that can make people aware of the issue. It can make people care about the issue. But what your impact campaign can do is to provide more information about what does the law in this country say about rape by somebody who you know? How is a case handled when the woman invited the man into her home? In other words, she knew him. You know, how do people feel? What are perceptions about date rape in the country? So that kind of understanding, that kind of information can be unpacked and can be provided by the campaign. For example, by setting up a website, by distributing flyers, by having information sessions, by hosting panel discussions after screenings. Panel discussions are incredibly powerful. And we see this time and time again, that just showing the film, again, creates awareness, makes people care, but it's not going to make them act without some kind of support. What really binds people to the issue and makes them act is a discussion, you know, hearing what other people think and hearing what they can do. So the next step in the aggregate impact funnel is action. We want people to take action. Otherwise, nothing is going to change. Just being aware won't change the law. So we have to move people to act. And then finally, there are some people in the audience who are going to be so moved by the issue or will care about the issue so much that they will organize. So they become an ally to you. And if you provide adequate resources to them so that they can organize screenings, help distribute all of that valuable information, link to NGOs, provide resources, then that helps you so much. It means that your campaign can just reach so much further. I want to jump into target audience. Mickey, I do see that we are 23 minutes into the session. Do you want to break here for a question, or should I soldier on?
I think there is a question from Morgan Morris, which I'm going to pose here. He says, I kind of imagine that all documentaries are designed as impact films. So we can unpack that as a question. Should and do all documentaries then have an impact campaign in mind right from the start?
So firstly, you are asking about, well, the first part of the question is, are all documentary films potentially impact films? No, they're not. I can think of many films that were made for entertainment. I can think, for example, of the film First Positions, which is about the biggest ballet competition in the US. So it follows a bunch of young people as they prepare over the course of a year to take part in this ballet competition. Another one that I can think of is Cutie and the Boxer, which is a Japanese film, I believe. And it's about the relationship between two artists and how the woman sort of takes a back seat because the man is a very well-known artist and his career is sort of takes the lead. But it's a humorous film. It's a film about relationships. So it's a love story, relationship drama. So I wouldn't say that every single documentary film is an impact film. And some films have issues that are perhaps not that important that it's necessary to throw a lot of money at running an impact campaign. Another film I'm thinking of is one that won an Oscar a few years ago, the same year that The Act of Killing was nominated, and it was called, now I'm struggling to remember what it was called, but anyway, it was like 10 Feet Behind or something like that. It was a film about backup singers and how they're not really spotlighted and they're these fantastic performers, but they never get to stand right at the front of the stage. So yes, acknowledging their role in making the music and creating a spotlight for these very important singers, it's great, but not important enough to my mind to spend social justice money on. So yes, there are lots of different kinds of documentary films, and some are purely for entertainment. Then the next question, the next part of the question, Mickey, sorry, remind me.
I think you've pretty much answered it. It's a follow-up. Do all documentaries have an impact campaign?
Yeah, so. He was asking about timing though, and Morgan, the earlier you can start working on your impact campaign, the earlier you can get an impact producer or a consultant on board to look at your film, the better. Because once your film is finished, it's late. It's late in the process to build relationships with potential partners. It's late in the process to start applying for funding. So that really is a process that needs to go from the beginning. And the other thing that I want to urge all of you to do is put an impact producer into your budget from the very, very beginning, because the earlier you can get an impact producer on board, the earlier they can start writing proposals, raising money. If your film has a social justice topic, if it's a topic that's important enough to you that you want to make a film about it and you hope that your film will effect change, get an impact producer on board. They can do that work for you. Okay, Mickey,
thanks. No, I think we should soldier on.
Soldier on, jump back in. Okay, So next, I do want to talk a little bit about partners, and I've alluded to this already. There are so many people out there who can become allies to you in doing this work. You are the filmmaker. You are the expert at making a beautiful film with a great character that's going to move the audience. But there are other people who can provide other resources to your project. Funders, for example. And if you want to hear more about the funders that are out there internationally, you should definitely join us for the second session tomorrow, which is the fourth and final session in the series. And we're going to be speaking to people who have amazing organizations that support impact, and also people who have quite interesting novel ideas for how to put impact campaigns together and support them without having tons of money. You also have subject matter experts. So let's say you're making an environmental documentary. You really need people on board who understand the environmental impacts of whatever the issue that you're dealing with inside out. Mickey mentioned a film to me yesterday, Dark Water. It's a Hollywood film that's just come out, and it's a fiction film. But it's about environmental pollution. And, you know, you can't make a fiction film that is going to be taken seriously by people if you don't have the facts right. And I'm tempted to say a lot more so in documentary film. If a documentary film gets something factually wrong, that is a massive target on the back of that film. I'm thinking of a recent example called Game Changers. It's a film about vegan athletes, and it's a fantastic film, and so many people after watching it say they're really inspired by it, and they're going to eat more vegetables, and they realize now that you don't have to just eat meat to be a good athlete. But in a lot of the reviews that I saw of the film, people point out that the experiments that are shown in the film are actually not scientifically valid. In the one case, because blood is taken too soon after a meal and the measurement is not really indicative of anything. And all they needed to do in the film is to say, we're just showing you these cute little experiments because they're entertaining. These are not this is not the science that our film is based on. But that was just, you wouldn't find a critical review that didn't focus on those experiments. So watch out that you don't get something critically wrong, either in your film or in the campaign that you design around it. And remember, those subject matter experts are going to understand the field. They're going to know who the funders and NGOs are that are interested in that topic. They can connect you with those people. They already have a certain standing. So if Professor so-and-so calls the Bertha Foundation and says, you know, you guys are already supporting another project that I'm working on. Here's a filmmaker who's making a film about the same topic. Can I introduce you? Would you consider a proposal from them? So those introductions are worth more than money, really. Distributors, so not only the conventional theaters, but the independent theaters, they are our allies, and there are loads of them, and there are different models for screenings across Africa. You know, in some countries, there are independent cinemas that look like conventional cinemas, and you find those in South Africa. But in other African countries like Ghana, the model is an informal space where people can eat and drink. It's a very small crowd. There's a television playing all the time, and people from the outside can watch as well. So, you know, you need to find those distributors that are appealing to the audience that you want to reach. And then, of course, those distributors that organize mobile screenings like Sunshine Cinema. NGOs, this should actually be your first or second port of call. You know, NGOs, again, they know the landscape, they know who the funders are, they know who the subject matter experts are, they are already interested in the issue if you find the right NGOs. So they can champion your film, they can use your film, they can support you. Some NGOs might not have money to support you, or smaller community-based organizations, but they can connect you with other people, and they can also give legitimacy to your screenings and events. Then influencers. These days, you almost can't get anywhere if you don't partner with influencers. And I do mean social media influencers.
Please, I have a question.
But we'll take a break for questions in a minute. But in different contexts, you'll have influences of different kinds. Mickey, for example, with her film, and you can find out more about that in the very next session, she partnered with community-based organizations, and some of them were quite small, but they were very influential because they had the ear of the community that she wanted to reach. And then in-kind contributions is another one. So this you'll hear a lot more about in session 4 tomorrow, where sometimes the model is not that I'm asking for $100,000, but I'm asking you to lend me your projector, or I'm asking you for a screening space. Can I use your theater for just one night? Or can you distribute my flyer on your social media where you have 1,000 followers? So those in-kind contributions that don't cost people anything are sometimes much easier to make. And then Mickey, shall we break? It sounds like that was quite an urgent question. So shall we take a quick break for questions? I do see that we have only 4 minutes left. So I think it is a good point to go to the questions.
Yes, I think a lot of people joined before we did the introduction. So we did ask everybody to please post their questions in the chat, just because it's a little bit disruptive when people speak and sometimes the audio isn't clear. So if you do have a question, I'm going to encourage you to write it in the chat now, and then we will make time to answer it.
Okay, great. I only have one section left, and that is to talk a little bit about when, where, and how you release your film. And for me, that's the time, place, and event. So it really works well if you can link your film release or your film screening to some kind of an event. So for example, it's just because it's the last film that I mentioned, Game Changers, a good opportunity to screen that film would be on International Vegan Day, or a good time to screen Bag It would be during, Plastic Free July, and to screen that film about rape. A good opportunity would be during October, during Women's Month. So you need to think carefully about when you screen your film. Public holidays can be great opportunities to screen the film. If there's a public holiday that commemorates, let's say, some kind of a conflict in your country, that would be a good time to release a film that also focuses on a similar topic. Then if your film is relevant to a court case that is happening, you can release your film around the beginning or the end of that court case. I've heard of people who screened their film against buildings outside the courthouse. So anyone entering or exiting the courthouse, and there was a group of protesters outside the court as well, all of them could watch the film. Where it really, really, really is important to meet your target audience where it is. I know it's the 3rd time that I've said that, but half your work is done if you can give your audience a film that they want to watch at a place where they are watching already. So if your audience is watching in mainstream cinemas, get your film there. If your audience in South Africa, 51% of our audience, as of the last National Film and Video Foundation research, was watching entertainment on the small screen, in other words, on a television through terrestrial broadcast. If that's my audience, I'm going to try and get my film onto one of the broadcasters in South Africa. But if your audience is rural, like a large part of our audience in South Africa is, then we're going to take a mobile cinema to a church or a community hall, or set up an inflatable screen outside. So we have to come up with ideas of getting the film to the person. But you also need to find ways of gaining media attention. So if you are the first group of filmmakers to set up an inflatable screen and have a drive-in movie screening in a certain province in your country or in a certain city, you can gain media attention purely through the way that you set up your screening and you reach your audience. So the other thing that is really important is the context that your film is being released into. So you need to be aware of what's happening in the media. You need to be aware of what's happening politically. You need to know what people think about the topic that your film is about. Because the worst thing that you can do is release a film too early or too late or into a context where it's just going to be much more difficult for that film to do the work that it's supposed to be doing. Okay, and that's where I stop. So Mickey, can we take 5 minutes for questions?
Absolutely. So Samuel, who I think interjected with a question earlier, he says he's got a powerful subject that he wants to make a docu-film about and highlight what the person has been through. But he wants the film not to just be about the person, but it's got to be theme-based and impact-driven. How do I settle on a theme that I want to revolve around?
I would highly advise that you start with the character, because again, if you want your audience to care about the issue, they need to care about the character. They need to see the impact of the issue on a particular character. So spend time with your character and ask your character, you know, what do you see as the themes? What do you see as the biggest issues? And let your themes and your issues and your impact goals evolve organically from that. And what I also want to really encourage you to do is when you set your impact goals, and this impact starter kit that I've given you should give you the basis from which you can now design your goals. Pick 1 to 3 goals. Keep it simple. You know, each goal should be a phrase or maximum a sentence. You need to be able to say very clearly and succinctly what your goals are. For Bag-It, the goal is to get the general public to use fewer plastic bags. Goal number 1. So that's behavior change. Goal number 2 is policy change, to get supermarket chains to stop offering plastic bags to customers. And then, of course, the awareness could be a part of that as well. You know, get the film to as many people as possible so that as many people as possible are aware of the issue. So there are 3 goals: awareness, behavior change, policy change. You know, you don't have to hit all 4 of those marks. You don't have to have each one of them represented as a goal. So 2 goals or 3 goals is absolutely fine.
So there's another question from a colleague, Michael. How do we get funds as young filmmakers? There is really no assistance for we young creatives to achieve our goals.
Yeah, okay, I want to encourage you to come to session 4 tomorrow. We've got so many ideas for you, and we're going to talk about who the biggest funders are internationally, but we're also going to talk about models for local support. And sometimes that support comes down to we do it for ourselves. And also in our next session, Mickey is going to be talking about her impact campaign that had a little bit of money, but that really optimized on using community-based organizations and linking the film to a legal issue that was busy playing out on a national stage in order to reach audiences. But I do understand what you're saying. You know, for an up-and-coming filmmaker, you haven't proven yourself. People don't know you yet. Maybe people don't trust you yet. It is really difficult. So one of the first things that I would encourage you to do is to see if you can meet up with somebody who has done impact before, who would be prepared to consult you a little bit at the beginning. You're going to have to do the bulk of the work though. But then the other thing is also, if you've done some filming, get into cutting a production trailer as soon as possible. A lot of people refer to it as a proof of concept. It's basically when you walk in and you're a young filmmaker and you haven't shown at a festival or nothing that you've made has been broadcast, you show them the trailer and they immediately see what you're capable of and what access you have to the characters or the situations that you want to make a film about. And that means a lot more to a funder than what your existing connections and experience are. So it is a difficult process, but start with small steps.
Okay, so we have run over time and we've got another session starting in 10 minutes that we all need to just collect ourselves for. I'm just going to ask one quick last question. Gloria wants to know how and if the process changes when working for a series versus a film.
Great question. This is definitely a space that is being explored a lot, and there would be certain things that are different. So you wouldn't have such a large focus on having community-based screenings unless it's a little bit difficult. Let's say you have a 10-part series. It's difficult to organize screenings where people see all 10 episodes. But what people tend to do a lot is they harness social media around the broadcast. So they engage their audience in live tweeting, and they post a lot of stuff on social media. They organize watch parties where people get together on social media platforms. Like, let's say we all say we're going to watch episode 1 at 9 tonight, and we're going to WhatsApp about it. I've done it with friends. So if you can create a strategy that gets people to interact in that way, interact with each other, interact with you, share the information, it's very powerful. The other thing that I want to point you towards is there's a webinar series hosted by, and Mickey, I sincerely hope that you've got the link tucked away somewhere and you can pop it in here quickly. There's a series, it's called Digital Power 2020. It's co-hosted by the CSMI, the Center for Media and Social Impact, and Together Films. And they have just done the most amazing series. And I think it was episode 4 was presented by a woman who is in charge of the social media campaign around a television series. So, and she gave incredible advice. So, find those resources online, go and have a look at Together Films. They do a lot of stuff online, a lot of webinars. Right now, there's so many webinars available. There's so many festivals that are opening their workshops and the industry engagements to a broader audience. So, find them, enjoy them, just go and watch and read and learn as much as you can.
Absolutely. I'm just putting that Center for Social Media, and I've put Together Films in the chat. So for those of you who haven't tuned into the chat, just look there. There's a multitude of resources. Quickly cut and paste them onto your computer so that you have them as a takeaway. And that brings us to the end of this session while we gear up for the next one. Thank you, Liani. That was really great. And I'm sorry we don't have time for any more questions, but there's going to be more time for questions in the case study session that follows. So please stay on board and jump into the next session.
Great. We'll see you there. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Liani.